Okay, so I'm sitting here in my car, and the idea was I wanted to go out to the countryside out in Ole and get a little bit of videotape of an actual sunset for inspiration. It's looking really pretty. It's very, very bright right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip the camera up so that we can kind of get a look at some of the colors. It's a little bit hard for me to see what's on the camera because the sun's in my eyes and it's so bright, but it looks like we have some kind of cool colors up here, and then it gets gradually warmer as it goes down, kind of more oranges and yellows, and then there's really intense yellow right around the sun, and then some white. Okay, so here we are in the studio, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do a overview of the materials that you're going to be working with. I'm going to introduce you to a set of colors known as a Zorn palette, and the sketch practice called thumbnailing, and then I will talk about how you can create a sunset scene from your imagination. And I'm also going to try to squeeze in a step-by-step version in there for people who prefer that. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the Zorn palette. And the Zorn palette is named for an artist named Anders Zorn. You can look him up. He typically painted portraits, and he used this palette to paint his portraits, which is a very limited number of colors. This is a normal color wheel, and you can kind of compare and see that the colors in the normal color wheel are quite bright. You know, you have your traditional red, yellow, blue, and then you got secondary colors, orange, green, and purple. The Zorn palette, by contrast, uses only this bright red, so it's a cadmium red replacement, yellow ochre, which is a very dull yellow, and instead of blue, it uses black. And then also I used white to lighten up each of these mixtures. Okay, so all of these colors came only from titanium white, yellow ochre, cadmium red hue, which is an imitation, safer cadmium paint color, and black. And by eliminating the blue and replacing it with something as neutral as black, I kind of think that this will be a good palette for a sunset because it doesn't have those cooler colors. Okay, the blues and bright greens and things that are on the normal color wheel are missing because we didn't use a blue at all. Okay, so here's those colors. I just put this on a piece of wax paper. You can use that as a palette, or you could use a wax paper plate, anything like that, plastic plate. I think your kit is also going to include a canvas board like this one, okay, and a brush. This is the brush I'm going to be working with. I'm going to be using about a 3/4 inch flat brush with synthetic bristles. When you're working with acrylic paints like these, you want to stick with synthetic bristle brushes because acrylics can be very rough on natural bristles, and you want to save your natural bristle brushes for oils. And you're going to need a paper towel and some water, of course. Okay, I think that's it for materials for now. And I have my laptop here to use as a reference. Like I said, you can do this out of your head, or you can go out and shoot a photo reference if you want to. Okay, there we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to create a Zorn palette. So you're just going to use this bright red, this dull yellow, and black, and you're going to use them to replace the traditional red, yellow, and blue that you see in color wheel. These are the new primary colors. Alright, so I'm going to paint on this little scrap of paper here. The reason it's good to do your own version of a color wheel is because you get to see how the few colors you're working with expand out into a huge range of colors, and how these colors might be useful for the painting that you want to do. So you could see, for example, this area here, I might want to stick with these mixtures up here, these light yellows and light oranges. As we move sideways in the sky, it gets a little bit redder, maybe a little bit duller, and this will be helpful for learning how that happens. Okay, so I'm going to start with yellow and I'm going to work my way around clockwise. This is the cadmium red replacement. And then on my palette, what I want to do is mix a color between the yellow ochre and the red, create a kind of a dull orange. That's going to go here. I'm going to do this fast. Of course, you can replay it or pause it as you need to. Now I'm going to use the cadmium red and the black. So I'm going to put black here in the blue position. I'm going to use the cadmium red and the black to make kind of purple. And this color isn't necessarily actually purple, but in the context of this wheel, with this limited number of colors, it'll look purple, just as the black ends up looking kind of blue in this larger Zorn wheel that I've already done. Then we're going to use black and yellow ochre to create a green. Try to keep your brush somewhat clean in between mixtures so that you don't dirty up your colors too much. Okay, so there's our green, a very dull green, because we've got no blue at all. We have this black, and then the yellow is also very dull. I still have this in my brush, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making tints of these colors, which is just basically the color plus white. This will help me see what's possible once I introduce white and create tints of these colors. So I'm going to put the tints going out, sort of like spokes on a wheel. Maybe I'll do 2 of each. So I'll do one with a little bit of white, and then I'll do one with a lot of white. You can see how it gets lighter. Alright, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how to create your own Zorn palette. Again, you're just going to take the yellow and the red, mix them together to make the orange. Make sure you clean your brush in between each mixture. Then you're going to take the black and the red, mix them together to create the violet. Wash your brush again, take the black and the yellow ochre, mix them together to make the green. And then while you have those mixtures on your palette, again, washing your brush in between each one, what you're going to do is add a little bit of white and then a little bit more white to create 2 different tints, kind of a medium tint and a pale tint of each color, just to see what's possible. And then if you have a reference photo like this one, you can start assigning specific mixtures to specific parts of the painting. It's just a good way to get familiar with your palette. Alright, so the next thing I want to show you is, oh, and by the way, make sure you wash your brushes out when you're done. Either keep them moist and wash them out really well with soap and water until the suds come out clean, otherwise the acrylic paint will damage your brushes. So this is the next thing I wanted to show you. These are called thumbnail sketches. They're just little, kind of like a postage stamp or a little bit bigger than postage stamp size sketches. I copied these off of photos that I had, but you can also do these out of your head just to kind of come up with some different ideas for compositions that you might want to use for your sunset. Okay, generally speaking, you're going to have a bright central area. Any figures, trees, houses, and things that are in a sunset scene will usually be pretty dark. There's not enough light to illuminate them more than a silhouette. Okay, so bright central spot, kind of a pale sky, bright central spot, little pale sky around that bright spot, and then silhouettes, silhouettes, silhouettes again. Okay, you can see it here. This little glowing effect that happens around the sun is called a color corona. It's like a halo of the sunbeams kind of hitting particles inside the air, or inside your eye, or inside the camera. So we can try to imitate that look in the painting. Okay. So my basic strategy for making this painting is I'm going to try to use the warmer side of the wheel, so these mixtures here, for the sky area. And then as I move down into anything in the ground, whether it be a tree or a building or the ground or a telephone pole or, you know, a person like this, I'm going to rely on the darker sections, these cooler colors that are clustered around the black, kind of purple section of the wheel. If I can avoid it, I'm going to try to avoid having greens, because greens don't usually show up too well in a sunset situation. Okay? I forgot to mention that you can take all three of the primary colors, so the black and the ochre and the red, and you can mix them together to get this neutral point. So it's kind of like this brown mixture. It's a mixture of this yellow ochre, the red, and the black, and they all come together to make a kind of just a dull brown. So let's do that on this wheel. Okay, so let's see if we can do a really fast painting here. And again, you can pause my video or, you know, slow it down if you need to. I'm going to try to work real quick to keep the video fairly short. So I changed my water, nice clean water, and I'm going to keep this Zorn color wheel that I made here as a reminder of all the different color mixtures that are possible and how I made them. All right. So I'm just going to start with kind of a little bit of a watered down paint, and I want to paint this here. That's what I decided I'm going to do. So I'm just going to really like rough this in pretty easily. See how I've got a flat brush and I'm choosing to move it this way so I get a nice thin line. So I want my horizon line to be about 1/3 of the way up. That's usually a better composition than going halfway. Usually I'm going to put it at 1/3 here or 2/3 of the way up. So in my case, I'm going to put it here. And then I'm just going to turn the brush this way, and I'm just going to start roughing in, kind of jiggling like this, roughing in the shapes of the trees. Now I'm using the corner of the brush. I want to avoid that spot because I want to keep it nice and bright for the sun. And then it goes up again. I think there's like a hill, maybe back here, something like that. Okay. And get more of that kind of watery neutral mixture, which was all three of the primaries, and just start filling in all of this dark area down here. Kind of paint over top of this stuff. But this is a good way to start. You can use a dampened paper towel like this to kind of lift out some areas while the paint's still kind of watery like this if you want. I'm trying to build up this color corona, a little bit of a halo early on in the painting process. Okay, so the brightest and purest color mixtures that I can get out of this palette are going to happen around the red, because the red is just the most vivid color. So red and maybe a little bit of the ochre mixed into it, and some of the white mixtures coming out of that area. So you can see on the bigger wheel here, the range from red into the yellow and those lighter, whiter mixtures. I want to make sure my brush is really clean for that, and that I'm not getting any black into the area that's right around the sun. Otherwise it'll spoil the illusion of brightness. I think right around the sun, I want to introduce a little bit of this white and a little bit of the yellow. I want it to turn a little more orangey. And I'm going to save a spot where the sun is, where I just keep it pure white. I'm going to brush this mixture back up into the paint that I already have here. As I get away from here, it's less yellow, a little bit more red. So I'm going to introduce some more red as I get further away. Maybe I'll brush it in an arc shape like this and blend it in while the paint is still wet. Again, I'm going to keep the red away from here. I want this to be more yellow. Keep the red more up in this area. Alright, now I've moved into, it's like really red, not so much of the yellow, maybe a little bit of the yellow, and I'm holding the brush this way and kind of doing this to create some of these cloud effects. Okay, this is not an exact copy of the photo, but it's kind of the spirit of the scene that I was looking at. So we're getting darker and redder as we move further away, and maybe I'll start introducing a little bit of black into the mixture to get some of these violets. So here I've put down some of this it's like a black and red mixture to make violet. It's really a hard transition between these dark clouds in the sky, so I'm just going to use a little bit of red to brush around the borders between the two to soften that transition a little bit. And again, I'm staying away from the sun area. I want to keep that bright. The area up here, I really shifted around to the black, still keeping some of this violet mixture, or this red mixture into it to give it that violet look. It was getting a little bit too dark, so I also added in a little bit of white to keep it a little bit lighter. I still feel like this is a kind of a sharp change between these two areas, so maybe I'll try to use a little bit of red mixed with white to soften that border up a little. Running a little bit low on some of these colors, so I'm going to refill them. I think for the ground area, what I'm going to do is make up that neutral mixture in the middle, but maybe emphasize the black a little bit. So you can see I've kind of come up with that brown mixture from mixing all three, red, yellow, and black together. And I'm going to just kind of start giving some shape to some of these trees and hills. I'm going to stay away from the sun area because I want this halo effect here to happen. I can just brush this around through here, and then as I get further away from the sun, I can add in a little more black. See how I'm brushing around kind of in a semicircular shape to help create that halo effect in the middle. Alright, now I want to add in some of those tree shapes that I had before. I'm going to turn the brush kind of vertically like this. Just kind of jab at it a little bit lightly. Okay, and now I'm going to do the halo, the rest of the halo, the bottom half of it. Okay, so I want this neutral mixture again. Some red, some yellow, and we want to have some of the black too, but not as much, because as we move closer and closer to the sun, we want to make sure that it's getting lighter and brighter. I'm going to wash my brush out quite a few times here. I'm going to go back in with that same mixture, but now I'm going to have a little bit more of the red and the yellow. Kind of narrowing this gap. Wash the brush out again. More yellow, maybe a little bit of white this time too. Okay, now I'm going to come in here with white paint, just white paint on the corner of the brush. And I'm actually going to paint in the sun because I don't want to leave that part unpainted. And kind of refine the circular shape of the sun. And then I want to brush into this yellow paint that's still wet, kind of soften the transition between that. Maybe I'll bring it around outside like this too. Alright, so that's more or less it. I'm going to come back in here and just do some refinements, and then I'll show you what I come up with. Okay, so the last things that I did was I thought the top part was too dark, so I used some mixtures of red, a little bit of yellow, and maybe some white, and I put in some of these lighter clouds up here. Then I used the neutral mixture to put in this road, and I made the road kind of reflect what's happening in the sky, so it's a little yellower here, then a little more red, then a little more violet. And last thing I'm going to do is some telephone poles. Alright, so I got a couple telephone poles in, just using the neutral mixtures, and here's how I'm doing it. I'm using the narrow edge of the brush, and I'm just kind of pulling down like this, and then just kind of touching like that to make the cross piece. For the wires, let's see, I'm really careful using this corner. Oh, those are a little bit thick. No, I can always refine them later if I need to. Okay. So here's what I came up with. Got a kind of fairly simple sunset painting with a color corona halo. We concentrated the more vivid colors from our Zorn color palette, which are the reds and the yellow ochres and the oranges produced from that, closer to the sun. And then as we go out, we included more red and then a little bit more black in the mixture. That's how we got these sort of slightly violet clouds up here. The ground was made of a neutral mixture of all three primaries, the red, the ochre, and the black. And then it was slightly adjusted as needed. So for example, as part of this color corona here, I put a little bit more red into the neutral mixture. Okay, and then I just did some blending and adjustments afterwards. So hopefully you enjoy this project, and good luck.